Hi, everyone. My name is Mackie Siebens. I'm the Director of Admission, and I graduated from Bard in 2012. I've been in touch with many of you, and we're so excited to welcome you to this webinar, and also to welcome you to Bard next week for many of you who are first years who are coming for language and thinking. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm joined by a fabulous panel, and we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we will get right to the quarantine arrangements and answer your questions. Again, welcome. So Cicely, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Virtually welcome to Bard. We can't wait to see you all next week. My name is Cicely Wilson. I'm the Director of Residence Life and Housing. I use she, her pronouns.
And Deirdre?
Hi, I'm Deirdre Delbert. I'm the Dean of the College and a Professor of English Literature. I'm happy to help with any questions you might have about L&T, having taught it 3 times myself. And also I have 2 kids, one who's just graduated from college, another one who's a rising sophomore. So I think I might have some inkling as to where everybody's at right now. Happy to answer questions.
And Bethany.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bethany Nolgren. I'm the Dean of Students here at Bard. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with the entire student life staff on making sure life outside the classroom. Deirdre's inside the classroom. I'm outside the classroom, make sure that everything is going smoothly.
Great. So I want to direct everyone to the Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to type your questions in there. We'll be able to answer them throughout the entire webinar. So feel free to jump in whenever something comes to mind. But I wonder if it would be worth starting, Bethany, with a sort of overview of what next week will look like for students who are arriving.
Sure. I'm going to ask Cicely to jump into because housing is a huge part of that. So when I mess up or forget something, she can hop on. So folks will arrive next week. We have 4 or 5 days of arrival days. They're going to start on Tuesday. You'll come to our main parking lot near Ludlow, which is actually where Deirdre's office is. It's our main administration building. There are plenty of signs pointing you in that direction. There you'll do the entire check-in. So we'll get you checked in. If you have to talk to student accounts, you can go talk to student accounts. We'll get your packets. We'll get your welcome bags, keys, IDs, all of that kind of good stuff. And then we will check the testing compliance. And so if you have a test that you're waiting on results, we'll note that. If you need to take a test, we have a testing site right there. If you have results, great. And then based on that testing result and based on whether you're going to be in quarantine housing because you're coming from an international country or a state that requires quarantine in New York State, we'll head you off to either your permanent housing or your temporary quarantine housing. In the evenings, the first year experience office, Darnell Pierce and Kate Heipel, who many of your students have heard from, will be having orientation activities. So there'll be lots of ways to orient you in the evenings. It's all going to happen virtually each of those evenings. So you'll engage the day you arrive. We're kind of repeating it every day. So if you don't arrive till the 7th, don't worry, you haven't missed something that we're doing on the 4th. And then come the weekend, come the robust orientation activities for everybody. There are a number of first year students who are studying remotely because physically they can't get to campus. And so we are incorporating them into our orientation activities and into all of the L&T and everything. So people will hop on from wherever they are. And then Monday morning starts L&T class. There's a big welcome by the president on Sunday night. And that will be, it's kind of our start to the academic program. And then Monday you'll meet your faculty member and engage in the work. So was that what you were looking for, Mackie?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And Deirdre did just answer a question about, we had a question about Thanksgiving. So thank you, Deirdre. Just so that everyone can see that. The plan for the November break, we really sort of through all of this have to constantly wait and see what the requirements are going to be and what the state of the local area is before we can make concrete sort of personalized decisions. But essentially what will happen is students will be able to travel home for the Thanksgiving November break. And if health sort of requirements state that students are not able to return to campus, there will be a path to completion remotely. for students. So you don't have to worry if you do choose to leave for the break. You will be able to complete your courses for the semester online. We also every year host Thanksgiving on campus for students who don't go home. A lot of international students, for example, who don't travel during the November break. So we do welcome students to stay on campus for the November break. And then, there may be a world in which students can leave and return, but we can't say that for sure at the moment. So right now we're just making sure that after the November break, students have a pathway to completion wherever they are. So I hope that helps to answer that question. We have a couple of questions coming in from the Q&A. So the first one is, if our test results are not in and you do another on arrival day, how long will it take to get the results, and will we still be able to get our assigned dorm room? So this probably brings in the sort of the broad sort of piece of this. So I might hand this over to Bethany.
Sure, no problem. So if you can think about the categories of people in 3 different sections, we've got people who have been, so take a step back. We totally understand that testing is almost impossible in some places, and it's very difficult in others, and it's quite easy in some places. When we were asked to consider the testing expectation, and when our consultants talked to us and said, this is really the right way to start, I don't think we realized nationally quite how badly it was going to be for some people to get access to testing. So we understand that people are not going to be able to come with testing, or people are not going to have it, right? So we understand that next week people are going to show up and say, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to get testing. Or they're going to say, we got testing, and they're going to tell us it's 12 days from now. That's why we've contracted with MIT Broad, which is a national research lab. They're doing a higher education only research and testing for COVID-19 at their site in Boston. And so what we are doing is they've promised us a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. We have plans to either courier, drive, or FedEx the tests to them daily. And the idea is that people will arrive next week, and we will assess where they are in the testing situation. Everybody needs to get a test. Whether you're quarantining or not, whether you had access to a test or not, everybody's going to be tested if they haven't already been tested. So we're thinking of our students in 3 different categories, and all of them are going to engage in all of the activities remotely or in person, and they're going to engage in all of the academic program remotely or in person, right? So the first category is the group of students who are coming from states or internationally that require quarantine by New York State. I want to emphasize that this is a New York State regulation that the college is happily complying with, because we believe in keeping everybody safe, but it's not Bard College rules. So we've worked with the health department to identify what are the key factors that we need to think about in quarantine and make those available for families. But this is a state requirement. So those students are in quarantine. You're coming from a state that requires it, or internationally, and there's no getting out of it. It's 14 days. It is what the state requires. That's group number 1. They will go into quarantine. They can drop some of their belongings off in their permanent room before they go into quarantine. They can take all their stuff with them if they want. I would rather drop some of my stuff off. Like, I don't need my sweaters right now, but you can drop stuff off pretty quickly, kind of a dump and run, if you will, drop it off and then head out and then go to your quarantine space. And we sent out a note last night to all the students. Hopefully the students shared it with the parents. But we have 2 spaces that we're doing quarantine. One is a hotel in Kingston, and one is a small number of rooms that fit the requirements here on campus. So you'll go to your quarantine space, and you'll be there for 14 days. There's staff living in the buildings. There's staff living at the hotel. They'll engage with the academic program and with the orientation program remotely, and then we'll bring them back to campus once the quarantine time is over. The second category of people are people who have been able to take a test and are waiting for test results, right? So we're calling that like the test result waiting period, and we ask that students shelter in place. So shelter in place is not as restrictive as quarantine. It means you can go pick up your food. It means you can go wander around campus and engage in things, but you're not supposed to be in groups, and you're kind of supposed to lay low. It's kind of what we've all been doing here in New York. I don't know about other states, but we've been doing in New York for the last 5 months, which is You go to the grocery store when you need, but you leave quickly. You don't go out for dinner, all of that kind of stuff. So we have a do's and don'ts for shelter in place, and those students will just kind of hold tight and shelter in place. The third category of students are people who have been able to get testing, have the results that are negative, and they can move in and do what they need to do. The shelter in place students, Cicely, correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to live in their own space for the shelter in place time?
That is correct. If they need to be separated, they'll be in a nearby room. So, you know, you might not, for the first couple of days while you're in shelter in place, be able to live with another person. Obviously, it's much less restrictive in terms of movement, but we just would like to keep you separated just in case. It'll be in a nearby room in the same building or a nearby building.
Great, thank you. So those are the three kind of categories of students, and everybody, no matter where they are in the world, will be able to engage in the academic program and in the orientation programs. We understand there are some people who are going to be in very different time zones, and so we've made adjustments to the orientation schedule. We have some duplicate programs, and we're also going to record things and send those on to students who can't watch them live. But for the majority of the people who are going to be here in Annandale, everything will be on the same track.
So we have a couple questions coming in about sort of movement during the semester, and another couple about how students will know where they're quarantining in which facility. So maybe we could address some of we talked a little bit about keeping people distant, and even if you're not necessarily in quarantine, but throughout the semester, what are shuttles going to look like in movement on and off campus during the semester?
Sure. So the college has put a limit on any non-essential travel for all faculty and staff, and we are asking the same of the student body. So we want people to engage in some critical thinking about what's essential travel and what's not. We've suspended we typically run shuttles to the train stations every weekend. We've suspended that. We do not want people traveling long distances or using public transportation, and limit it as much as possible. We will still have the shuttle that runs between Tivoli campus and Red Hook so that people can get to Commerce. They can get to the grocery store, they can get to restaurants. We will have a weekly shuttle to Kingston where they can get to Target and Walmart. But we are asking that people really think critically about what their needs are for traveling. We understand that someone might need to go home for a doctor's appointment. We understand that there might be a family situation that going home is necessary. What we're asking people to do is that they limit their public transportation as much as possible. They try to use private transportation. And if someone goes home to a state that requires quarantine, they will need to quarantine upon return. So that's something that in their thinking they need to consider. So if someone says, look, I've got to get home to Washington, D.C. for this family situation, they need to, right now, Washington, D.C. is on the list of quarantine states. If they stay there for more than 24 hours, they will need to quarantine upon return. And so they'll have to consider that and work that out with their faculty to make sure that there's an option for them to be able to engage in the work remotely for those 2 weeks while they're quarantining. They will also have to figure out how to do the quarantine. We are prepared to quarantine students because of contact tracing, or if we have a positive case and they get identified as someone who needs to quarantine until the time is over. But we do not have space on campus to quarantine for students who decide to leave campus, go to another state, and come back. That's their own choice, so they have to figure out how to do that quarantine on their own. Other questions, Mackie, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to pay attention to the chat. I'm doing
no problem. I'm doing that. Don't worry about it. So the other question, and sorry, I was answering a question while you were answering this. So is about, I don't know if you mentioned how students will know where they're quarantining. That's something that they'll get upon arrival.
They're going to get that upon arrival. Cicely, I don't know if you want to, I'm happy to talk, but if you want to tell how we kind of made that decision, that would be, yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have, lots of spaces that would accommodate the type of quarantine that is necessary. So we're reserving those spaces for folks who are unable to or don't have assistance to get to the hotel. Maybe they're arriving at a time that is really late or alone by themselves. And other factors. So really the majority of the students who have to complete a quarantine will be at the offsite location. So if you're wondering, you're most likely going to be quarantining at the hotel.
So we
And
haven't.
to be honest with you, the
go ahead.
three of Deirdre, Cicely, and I went to the hotel yesterday, and I think all three of us volunteered to stay at the hotel because we were like, "Ooh, this is really nice." So we were.
It will be comfortable. It'll be
Yeah,
comfortable.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you're driving in kind of off the main road. You're like, where am I going? And then you sort of arrive at this Best Western and you go in and it's really very comfortable. So
Yeah, recently renovated.
yeah.
Within the last couple of years, I believe.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of questions that are a little bit more technical and more specific about the timing of the tests. And so I want to stress that the timing of the test itself is important. So if you did get a test a while ago because you were worried that the results weren't going to come in, the window for testing, that 5-day period before you arrive, is really the most important thing for getting your test. If students who, there's one example here of someone who is quarantined in New York for the past, it says, several days. Our son's test was done before we departed TN. See, not within 5 days of his move-in date. Should we be expected to test again? And so what I would say to that is that we will have testing on site for students when they register, if they don't have a test or if they have arrived without a test result that they can submit to us. For students who have quarantined, they'll be able to move through the registration process, move into their permanent room, and set up their permanent room and won't have to quarantine in either Robbins Hall or the hotel. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, but that's my understanding of the technicalities of the testing.
As long as they have a result, right? Is that correct, Bethany? They've quarantined or come from a state that is not restricted and they have the result in hand, then there's no shelter in place and there's no quarantine. Right?
So for students who have quarantined and don't have a result yet, they'll be able to quarantine, but they'll be quarantining in their permanent space, not in a quarantine
sheltering
space.
in place.
Sheltering in place.
Right. Okay, great.
A lot of language.
Yeah, perfect. Sheltering in place. Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm just going to mark this.
Could someone talk about going outside or the ability to kind of move around? Because I've seen a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. Sure. So again, I want to emphasize that this is New York State and not Bard College, and we are doing our best to talk with the public health officials twice a week to get real clarity. And they, as we continue to get closer and closer to this date, they continue to help us understand it. This is what they're asking. Folks can go outside, they can take runs, they can take walks, they can exercise outside, they can sit underneath a tree, they can go with somebody else. They should remain 6 feet apart, and they need to have their mask on while they are going outside. They can take their mask off as long as they are very safely far away from others. So in a field, walking on a path with nobody around, right? I live on campus. I have been here every day for the entire quarantine and shelter in place. And I have dogs and I take them for walks every day. I keep a mask with me. And if I see that I have to get close to someone, we either walk far out of the way or I put a face covering on. So that is what we're expecting students to do. The health department has said, please don't go out in groups. Please don't congregate in groups. Don't go, if you're in quarantine, please don't go into buildings. Don't get on public transportation. Don't go into restaurants. You can have food delivered. You can do a contactless pickup at a place. But that what they are saying is stay away from crowds of people and stay away from towns, busy areas, right? So the hotel in Kingston is, walking distance from their uptown business area. And the health department very clearly said, tell students not to go there. There's a rail trail. There are some beautiful running paths. There are some really great, nice spaces around there to hang out. We were actually scoping it out because I'm going to be there for a while. You know, there are good places to sit outside, hang out with a book, all of that kind of stuff. But you need to have a mask when you're walking inside a building, and you, you can, you know, do all of that kind of stuff. So that's the walking around. You should just limit yourself from like sort of the dense areas where you are. I see a question about when do we find out which quarantine option we have, Robbins or Best Western? And then if it is the Best Western only quarantine students? No, we have not rented the entire hotel. It can actually have the capacity almost twice of what we have, right? So it's not going to be the entire hotel. Students won't have the run of the place. They shouldn't actually be running around the place anyway. So, and then there was an additional question, which is, can families work out a quarantine plan for themselves and not take advantage of the college's offer? Absolutely, 100%. Quite transparently, we'd be happy if you did that. We are more than willing to have you say to us, you know what, we're going to take care of this. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Our student will engage in the academic program from Philadelphia or from Maine or Massachusetts. That would be honestly great. That would be fine, as long as they have good access to the internet. They have their own space to engage in the academic and the orientation program, and they have a computer. We'll make that work. The academic program requires a reading. There's a very thick anthology. They have turned that into a PDF. We can email that to you. So if you decide that you want to do that, you need to contact, Cicely, can they contact you? Should we have Res Life be the contact for? So you would want to contact Residence Life, and our email for Residence Life is reslife, RESLIFE @bard.edu. We are happy to we actually have a lot of families who are doing that, and the more people, the more people to do that, the better.
So just looking through these questions, we have what happens if we test positive for COVID-19 upon arrival? So maybe we could go over the plan for not only testing, but also what happens obviously in this case, and contact tracing and that sort of system. We also had a question that ties into this, which is how will the symptom monitoring and app piece of that work as well?
Sure. I feel like I talk a lot, I'm sorry. But if someone tests positive for quarantine, they will be moved to our, test positive for COVID, sorry, too many words. Someone tests positive for COVID, they'll be moved to our isolation housing, which has been identified by the health department and Nuvance, which is our health consultants, as the most ideal place. They all have their in-suite bathrooms. We've put microwaves and refrigerators in there. They have a separate entrance to the building, and it's got its own ventilation system. So students will move into there. They'll immediately be monitored by our health services and the health department of Dutchess County. And they will get daily check-ins from both the Dutchess County Health Department and our health services. Health services will probably be a little bit warmer than Dutchess County, right? And then we will also have staff checking in on them, making sure they're doing okay. We'll be delivering food. We can deliver medication if needed. The health services will really direct our response, and they will tell us if we need to drop stuff off or if there are packages and things like that. What will happen at that point, this is why we're asking people to shelter in place, right? So all of this is to prevent any kind of spread. So the reason we are asking people to kind of hold tight and slow down until we have a test result is because if someone comes and we're waiting for a test result, and then 3 days later we discover that they have tested positive, we don't want to have found out that they've hung out with people without masks on in a lounge 5 times, because then we've got to call all of those people and we have to quarantine everybody. So this is why following the quarantine and shelter in place rules are so important to keeping the community and keeping the space safe. So this is why if we don't have a negative test result when you show up on campus, we're going to ask you to shelter in place. It means really laying low, always having your mask on. You can go into the cafeteria, you can get food to go, and then you have to head out. There's no eating indoors in the cafeteria. There's also no eating less than about 10 feet away from somebody else, because once you take your mask off, you're really shifting the way the virus can spread. And so we want to make sure people are really far away from others. You can talk with people, you can take walks, you know, small groups, 1 or 2 other people, but no big group activities. So what will happen is our health services will continue to monitor you, work with you, and we will just monitor the health situation, and then obviously contact additional medical resources if they're required. That's how we're handling it. And then contact tracing means that the health department and our contact tracing team will confer and discuss with the student what did their close contacts, who were their close contacts 72 hours, 3 days prior to symptoms. If there were no symptoms, we have to sort of go, I think they go back 4 days. And so what they do is they say, okay, who were you in front of without a mask? Who did you spend a lot of time with in a small space without a mask? There's a whole list of questions that I'm not a doctor and I'm not a public health expert. So we have a team of people who have been trained through the Johns Hopkins course on this. And then we will determine, and the health department with us will determine who do we need to contact and say, it's time for you to quarantine. You need to lay low and you need to quarantine for the next 10 to 14 days is typical from the point of contact. It may mean that they call you and say, hey, Dad, I've tested positive. We drove in that car together for 5 hours. You know, you have to quarantine, right? So there are lots of people. The college will be responsible for calling our community members. The health department will be responsible for calling anybody that's not in the BARD community. Did that answer the question?
I think it did. Yeah. The only other piece was, and maybe we'll be able to move students through this process, but the actual checking of your symptoms and the sort of technical piece of the app itself.
Yep. So the app is very easy to use. It's actually going live early next week, and we will send instructions to all students. It asks you to, have you had a fever recently? Do you have any unexplained coughs? Do you have unexplained eye irritation? Do you have unexplained nose irritation? You know, as someone who has both asthma and allergies, it's really hard some days where I'm like, oh, what's going on here, right? Are you exhausted? Have you, so it asks you several symptoms and you answer the question, and then it gives you a green, a yellow, or a red pass. If it's green, it means you're good to go. You can head out for your day and do what you need to do. If it's yellow or red, it's going to ask you to contact the health services so that we can do a little more investigation to figure out what might be going on. They will ask you to kind of hold tight and not go out and go to class or go to the cafeteria or anything until that conversation with health services has happened. But it's really, this might be a really good time for first years incoming students to talk with their families or to talk with their medical professionals about, like, what are the things that I, particularly given my health history, should be paying attention to. I had this conversation with my doctor back in March as an asthmatic, which is, what do I need to be paying attention to? How do I do kind of a body check every morning so that I'm making the best decision for me and my family? And this is probably a really good decision for people to do before they arrive, or, right as they get here, to have a telehealth conversation with their pediatrician or home doctor. What are the things I in particular need to be paying attention to? This is a lot about, sort of knowing yourself, knowing your body, and the personal responsibility of what it means to take care of a community.
So there are a couple questions coming in, again, sort of about the technical piece of who qualifies, who must quarantine and who mustn't. And I just want to stress that if you are coming from a restricted state or outside the US and you have not quarantined in a non-restricted state for at least 14 days, you must quarantine regardless of your test result. So let's say you get your test result today and it's negative, and you had the test 3, 4, 5 days ago, and you're coming from a restricted state. next week when you arrive, you will need to quarantine regardless. And this mainly has to do with the nature of how symptoms develop with COVID-19 patients and when they are contagious and not contagious. And so we need to make sure that we're getting students tested, that we understand where their test results are once they start on campus. And so we can monitor them all the way through quarantine and all the way through this very crucial move on to campus period. So I just want to stress that if you're coming from a restricted state, regardless of your test result, you must quarantine in either Robbins Hall or in at the Best Western.
Mackie, I want to sort of talk, there are a lot of questions, and this is sort of the hardest part of all of this for all of us. There are a lot of questions that people want very concrete answers to. Am I allowed to get in a car and drive to Philadelphia and have dinner with my family? Am I allowed to, can my family, if we're quarantining from another state, come in, unpack all of my things, get my room totally settled and leave? I think that what's really important in these situations is for families to really understand that all of these measures is about keeping people safe, and it's not meant to be punitive. It's not meant to be restrictive. It's really directed and informed by all of the science that we're hearing from everybody about aerosolized saliva and all of this kind of stuff. And so we are doing our best to not only understand it, but comply and also have our own expectations. A lot of things that are going to happen this fall are going to be conversations that you need to think through and decide, what are my risks, what's the risk to the community, and what do I want to do, and what do I want to put myself through, and what do I put my family and my community member through. There are lots of folks on campus who can be available to help you think through things, but we are not going to be able to have in every moment a yes or no. Right? My parents live in Warwick, New York. That's 45, an hour and a half away. Can I go down and have dinner with them? Well, are you having dinner with 35 people in a backyard party, or are you having dinner in your home where your parents have been and they've been sheltering in place and it's pretty quiet? Are you going to drive in a private car? Are you going to get an Uber? Or are you going to take a public bus? Right? So the more you limit your exposure, the better off you'll be, and the better off we will be as a community. And so there was a question in the Q&A of like, how long will my parents have to help me unpack if we're quarantining, right? I want to be really clear. The health department is not super happy about us letting parents come into the residence halls if they've been asked to quarantine.
Right.
It's something we've really pushed for because Deirdre and Cicely are both people who have dropped children off at college before. It's a really big day. It's really momentous. We know it's going to look different this year, and we're trying as best we can to push a little bit to make sure that there's some family time. But the health department has said, please have them drop off and walk out the door, right? So they don't even want us to allow families who are required to quarantine, who are coming from states that require quarantine, into the buildings. So we have said, what if we tell the families to be really careful? What if we ask them to wear masks? What if it's sort of quick? They can go see the room, they can poke around, parents. I laugh because my mother would have been like, great, pack your own stuff. You take, I always joke, my mom and I were like, yeah, this would have been perfect for our relationship 30 years ago. But so I think I want to tell you that we're not going to be able to have an answer to every single question, but we are asking people to really consider the risk to yourself and to the community and to those around you, and make the best choice you can regarding exposure and spread, right? Many of you are coming from states that are now at the hot spot and the center of the pandemic. And New York is sort of on the other end, or we're in the middle of it, or we're on a different end of it right now. What Georgia and California and Texas are going through right now is what we were living in March and April. And so we understand that fear. We understand the way you had to navigate things, the way you had to really slow down. And it's very hard and it's very exhausting to think about every single movement you make differently every time. What did I just touch? How did I just open the door? did I just sneeze? You know, the things that 7 months ago, none of us thought about, we think about 400 times a day now. And so what we're asking families is, we're not saying we want you to not be here because we don't like you. We're saying the more people navigate our campus, the more people who are here, the harder it is for us to contain it. And the only way we're going to be able to do this successfully this fall is if we limit contact as much as possible. We want to create like a little Bard bubble so that we can learn and engage and do work here together this fall. And that's why we're putting a lot of this in place. It's not meant to be punitive or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. Sorry for my little soapbox about that, but I know there are a lot, I'm getting a lot of questions of like, can I do this very, very specific thing? And it's hard to say yes or no, because these are state rules, not Bard College rules, but we want people to really slow down.
So we have a couple questions about late arrivals and people who are need to change their arrival date. I've been telling people to reach out to the response team, but maybe that's incorrect.
Cicely should take that one. Res Life is managing a lot of the arrival stuff. So if Cicely wants to talk about that, we've been forwarding that to Res Life, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So
Sorry
yeah,
about
you
that.
can send it to reslife@bard.edu. It's also appropriate if you've been in communication with Darnell Pierce and communicated your arrival to him, then it's been received.
And does that include people who are arriving after August 7th? A lot of students are, I see a couple here for August 8th. I imagine we can accommodate as long as they're clear about when they're arriving.
Yes. And yeah, it's helpful for everyone to hear, as long as they go through, I think your email was really specific, a checklist of items to sort of go down that list and make sure that you've attempted or tried to do everything there. It's just going to make your check-in much more smooth, especially on a weekend. But yeah, to make sure you check your student account, sign the contract addendum that is up on my Annandale now. You know, just go through that checklist of items.
A question. Oh, go ahead, Deirdre. You're muted.
I remember us talking about this in the last week, which is, what if a parent wants to stay with their kid for the quarantine? I mean, if they were to go to a different location and quarantine together, that might be one way if that was something they were interested in contemplating. It wouldn't make sense to do it in the official quarantine hotel, but if there was an alternate site, has that been discussed?
You mean if the family arranged an alternate site?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. That's fine.
Okay.
The parameters that you should think about for an alternate site are, do you have good internet access? Do you have a quiet space that you can engage in orientation and academic activities? And do you have a space where you can do work and reading and, you know, so a small hotel room with other people probably isn't the best space because you don't have private space to engage in coursework. But a small Airbnb or a suite or something, we are more than happy to have someone send us an email and say, we figured out our own quarantine. Thanks so much. We'll be there on August 21st. You can come late. That's fine. We will work it out. Like I said earlier, and not to put too fine, like we have to pay for these hotel rooms. We have to pay for delivery of food. There's a lot of work and a lot of staffing that's going into this. We have to have staff live at the residence halls. I have to be there to check in and do all this kind of stuff. So the fewer people we have in the hotel, the better it is, because you actually will quarantine in a space that's most comfortable to you with people that you are comfortable with. And that's totally fine.
A question, and this I think is mainly for Robbins, because I imagine the rooms in the hotel will have fridges, mini fridges. So if you needed to keep things cold, you could do that. For students in Robbins, obviously Robbins has a shared kitchen. What is the situation if students need to keep things cold in their room in Robbins?
Each of the quarantine spaces in Robbins have a mini fridge and microwave combination, and they also have their own ensuite bathroom. So it actually is accommodating the requirements of quarantine.
Great, thanks. We had a question here. So if we're coming from California, there's no reason to get tested prior to arrival. We're asking that students get tested prior to arrival. So if you haven't organized that test, I would do so as soon as you can. That's what I would say to that. Is transportation to the hotel going to be provided for students arriving? Yes, if you are not able to get yourself to the hotel upon arrival, you'll be, if you're quarantining in the hotel and not on campus, we'll be able to get you to the hotel. That's no problem. And then we have a couple questions I saw earlier and right now from transfer students. What will orientation look like for transfer students? So I imagine, Bethany, it's going to be the same thing, just later in August. So everything that we're saying pertains to you, just on a bit of a different timeline, seeing as most transfer students will arrive later in August. I believe between August 18th and August 25th are their arrival dates.
Yep, exactly right, Mackie. It's going to be very similar. That some of what we say in transfer orientation is different than first year orientation because requirements are different and stuff like that. But Timon Bates, our transfer dean, has been working hard getting the schedule ready. So it will be very similar, and quarantine situation will be the same unless the state has changed something by August 18th for us, you know, because that's the way things seem to be going these days. Is every
Governor
week.
Cuomo.
Governor Cuomo, we love him. He's been doing an amazing job. He's keeping people safe, but Deirdre and I are on the major college planning team, and I tell you, we meet twice a week, and I think every time there's a like, well, okay, that didn't work, you know, gotta come up with a new thing. So yeah, there are a lot of questions about travel to and from the hotel. So we are hoping that families, when they arrive, can do the check-in, they can drop stuff off in the residence hall, and then they can drive their student to the hotel. If people are coming without family or cars, we have a whole system to drive you over to the hotel. You can drop whatever you want off in your room, and then we can get you over to the hotel. That's not a problem. And of course, we are bringing people back from the hotel. We are not going to make people just figure out how to get back here on campus.
Walk over the river.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No Ubers, really?
No
Really?
Ubers.
No,
Wait,
no.
can I ask a question? Because this would be the question I would be asking. I'm sorry. I mean, I feel like Cicely and I were like the parental, you know, question askers here. But what about if you want to get in touch with the hotel? Who, you know, will there be a staff person if you call the front desk? There will be somebody who will be that day's point person if you need to speak to somebody from Bard.
Oh yeah, so probably the best thing is here's sort of a sticky thing that you know, we're now in FERPA adult land, which
That's
means
right.
the hotel is not going to give you any information about
No.
your student. They're not going to tell you what room they're in. But if there is an emergency, probably the best thing to do would be to contact our security on campus.
Okay.
Their phone number is, you can look it up, but it's 845-758-7460. And they will contact our on-call system. And so if there seems to be an emergency that someone needs to get in touch with your student, or something's going on, we can, that would probably be the best thing. That we did meet with the hotel folks yesterday, and their general manager is a gentleman named Christopher. And they were very clear with us that if they have parents calling saying, you know, I need you to knock on my kid's door, can you tell me what room it is? They're not going to do that, because they don't do that for any of their residents or their clients. So, but we do know that parents might want to have stuff delivered, or, you know, and all of that. And when you check into the hotel, they are going to send us packets of information that they normally give some of their guests about food and stuff like that. And, you know, I think it was funny because Deirdre and I were kind of like, is there a list? And someone looked at us and they were like, yeah, it's called Yelp, you know, or it's, you know, like, so some of us are the older who are not quite as used to using our phone for every single thing, wanted a list, but they said it's totally fine. So we'll help you out, but we will have staff living there. We have we don't have the complete schedule yet, but we've got the L&T, you know, the first 2 weeks done of what staff will be living there.
might take a moment just to point out that an email went out yesterday, and Darnell Pierce, one of the first-year deans, sent out a really helpful checklist earlier this week as well that has a lot of important information in it, including some of the numbers and email addresses that we've been putting in the chat. So that includes security, health services, both phone and email, Res Life, and a couple other things. But we will be providing a contact list upon arrival as well. But just if you're interested in noting some of those contact, some of that contact information and some of the information here too, there was written communication earlier this week that you should have in your inboxes too, where you can see some of this information as well. So let's see. Let's see. Is there again some questions about where students will be quarantining? That will be determined upon arrival. So if you're arriving late, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be in one place or the other. We will have scheduled you to be in a quarantine place, so you'll understand where that is upon arrival. Mental health professionals on campus gearing up for what's likely to be stressful and anxiety-filled semester. Absolutely. Bethany, I'll send that over to you. Sorry. Our rock star, Bethany.
It's fine. It's fine. I should have taken some honey lozenges or something before this, talking the whole time. It's fine. Yes, I supervise the counseling center and the health center. And so we've spent a great deal of time this summer talking about how they can shift their services and think differently about supporting students. They're adding a lot more kind of wellness, mental health groups to campus, intentional meditation, ways to take a breath, ways to have some sort of mindfulness added to your day. They're also shifting their approach to more of a trauma-based, informed, trauma-informed counseling-based practices, which they've been doing a lot of research and going to different in-services this summer, thinking very specifically about the ways in which people's brains are physically changing during the pandemic, particularly young students who have had a lot of shift in expectations of what their life could look like, should look like, all of that kind of stuff. There have been some major milestones for the graduating class of 2020 and the incoming college class of 2020 that is really shifting the way people saw their futures. We have 6 full-time counselors on campus. 2 of them are psychologists. The 4 of them are licensed social workers. The director has been with us for over 10 years. They're a really diverse, thoughtful group of people. We will also have a psychology intern who is finishing his PhD, and he'll be running some of the groups and sort of helping students through this process. The counselors are each looking at ways that they can have groups so that people can rely on each other and really connect across campus in different ways. But all you have to do is go onto their website and submit a form that says, I really need to talk to a counselor, and someone will get back to you very quickly and they'll set up a time to meet. 95% of our meetings will be teletherapy online, but we will have a staff member in the building every day, Monday through Friday, in case there's an emergency. And so we're thinking really deeply about it. We also have residence life staff who lives on campus. Cicely supervises the residence life staff and the peer counselors. I know that their training is kind of focused on helping students through this and all that good stuff. Do you want me to answer the question about meals?
Yes, that would be great. I actually left that for you. Thanks.
Yeah. So the question, can you explain meals more for shelter in place? And the all clear. Yep. The cafeteria is called Klein Dining Commons. It's in Central Campus. They will be operating on a serve basis, not a open buffet basis. So students will not be picking up any utensils to serve food themselves. All of our grab and go stuff will be individually wrapped so that you're not touching a lot of things. And then there will be hot foods and salads and pre-made salads and all of that kind of good stuff that folks will serve for you in a container that you will then take. So our food service is a company called Parkhurst. You can look them up. They're great. They're have a pretty localized way of thinking about food that's chef oriented. We actually just met the other day with them and our campus farmer to talk about all the kale and beets and tomatoes that are heading that way for arrival this week. So for shelter in place students, the expectation is you go in, you get your food, you get your drinks, whatever you're going to get, and then you head outside. You can go eat back in your room. You can find a shady spot. You can eat at a table, kind of far away from folks. You could, but the idea is that when you're eating, if you're in shelter in place, because you're taking your mask off and there are, you're breathing, well, I guess we're always breathing, but once you take your mask off, we want you to kind of stay away from other people. For the students that are in the all clear category, which to be clear will be everybody after 2 weeks, right? The dining hall will be at about 50% capacity, and we've limited it to 4 people per table. We've expanded the amount of seating outdoors, and we expect a lot of students, because this is what happened in March, a lot of students are going to kind of go elsewhere to eat. There is some anxiety on campus generally about eating in front of other people. And so a lot of students have said, can I take my food and go? That's totally appropriate. It's totally fine. We're going to have staff, student staff in the cafeteria who will be helping to monitor to make sure that folks aren't lingering for an hour and a half taking up a table so that we can have turnover. It's sort of the way restaurants now have like a 45-minute eat and go kind of situation. But everything for now will be served. They will have specific meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all of that kind of stuff. And then once the semester starts in September, we will open up the other 2 eateries on campus, which is down the road in the campus center and Manor Cafe up in Manor. And they'll be doing kind of a modified version of their services, but again, it will all be served. There'll never be a situation either at an activity or in the eating areas where a student will pick up some tongs and get their own salad. So I realize I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
Really interesting question in the chat. What happens if your state comes off the quarantine list?
Like while you are
while you're in the quarantine.
Yeah. So
do you just get out of jail immediately?
You don't. Unfortunately, I asked this question. You stay in quarantine because you came to us while it was a quarantine state.
Okay.
So if you're like,
good point.
Oh, those Minnesota people, right? They're like, come on, figure, we came on. And
that's where I come from, everyone.
I know. Yeah, I'm a Chicagoan, and so the second Illinois went on the list, I got lots of texts from my friends that are like, but yeah, you don't. We clarified that with the state that once you enter quarantine, you have to fulfill it for 14 days, and there's no circumstance under which you can get out of it.
Got it. So everyone remember that.
And one other question here regarding quarantine. If students have arrived to New York and are quarantining here, not for a full 14 days, but say for a week or 6 days, we're saying that will count towards their quarantine in a non-restricted state, which means that their quarantine on campus in a quarantine space is reduced. So I hope that answers that specific question. So any quarantine that's done in a non-restricted state prior to arrival will count towards your total 14 days required quarantine. We have a question related to students who want to work out. The gym will not be open. It will not be available to students, but we have lots of space. So if you're on campus, you can go for runs, you can do outdoor workouts. Outdoor yoga, I think, is something that's also being planned, and a lot of outdoor activities, spreading out and using the space. And if you're in the hotel space, there is a rail trail. You can run and walk up and down that and be outside. So you should be able to get a workout in, even if you can't use the gym.
Can I ask another question? Because this is interesting. People asking about where they're allowed to go. I think if folks haven't seen our campus, of course, there's some students who live off campus and who come every day to campus. So the question is about, being able to go to in our local area to buy things if you're not quarantining or anything, right? So maybe we can clarify about our very local area, what is possible in terms of student movement.
Sorry, in terms of student movement on campus?
Yeah, on campus, but then, the relationship to things directly in our area, like Red Hook or Tivoli.
Yeah. So there will be shuttle services to Tivoli and Red Hook, which we normally have just in a regular year, but there will be mandatory mask wearing, social distancing while in transit. And then we will also have the weekly shuttle to Kingston, but the same thing. You will need to be distanced from other people using the shuttle and wear your mask at all times. And then, of course, walking around campus, if you're using the trails or the paths or getting from place to place, just making sure that you are avoiding people. You're trying to stay 6 feet or more apart. Feel free to go on walks. Many of us have done walks or runs that are socially distant from colleagues and friends. So you can do all of that, but passing people, luckily 1,000 acres is a lot of space, so you can easily avoid people and wave from a distance. So we know it's not ideal, but we're actually really well set up to have students distancing and exploring campus at the same time, and the local area for that matter. So let's see, other questions here. We could talk a little bit about laundry. I know that's something that was in the email that we sent out yesterday. Laundry facilities are in Robbins Hall, and we did suggest that students set timers so that you're not sort of sharing the same space with other people doing their laundry. You're constantly checking on your laundry and picking it up as soon as it's done. So just make sure you do that. And then for students in the hotel, we will be able to do a one-time pickup for students who need laundry, and then towels and sheets. You could just drop them right outside your room. They'll be picked up and replaced with fresh towels and sheets when you need them. So I hope that answers questions about laundry. We know 2 weeks is a long time to go without laundry, so we want to make sure students can change their sheets and have clean clothes and things like that.
Mackie, can I say one thing? There is a question that someone asks quite astutely about why can't we get out of quarantine if we test negative twice within the quarantine days and all of that kind of stuff. To reiterate, this is a state requirement. It's not BARD's requirement. We haven't set up the rules. We've asked several times of the health department and the state health department, what if we set up the testing? What if we do all of this stuff? And so far there has been no movement on changing their expectations that folks stay in quarantine for 14 days. So what the college is doing is we are making space available for you to do your mandated quarantine. Deirdre and I were on a call the other day where we learned that Fordham sent a note to all their students and said, good luck with your quarantine. Good luck figuring it out. We'll see you after you've done your quarantine. You can't quarantine on campus and we're not doing anything to help you. St. Lawrence, one of our neighboring schools, is charging students $100 a day plus $250 for food. So this is a state requirement that BARD is putting systems in place to help you satisfy the state requirement. This is not something that BARD has put into place, and we are complying with the expectation, but the relationship that you have to quarantine is between you and the state. It's not between you and BARD. If you break it and something happens, it's the state that will come knocking and talk to you about what happened. So I know I've said this before, but this is really, really, really all about containment and reducing the spread. And so these measures may feel extreme, they may feel hard, but they're what the state has put into place. And so we are complying with the state regulations, and we are helping people to figure this out by offering this, by delivering food, by putting people up in a hotel, by changing our entire housing plan. Like, we're doing all of this because we know it's hard, but I cannot emphasize enough that like, we're not in charge of the rules here. We are just doing what the health department has been telling us to do. And we've pushed a couple of times and they're pushing back, and we're doing the best we can for you. I have to be clear about that. So Luke, I appreciate the questions. We've asked them a million times and we are getting, sorry, this is the rule. But I like Luke's questions because it means he's thinking really critically about this, and he's asking good questions that any good thinker who's read scientific journals would ask. But it has not changed. So
I see a question here about, and there have been a couple about parents and quarantine coming from restricted states or outside the US. What you do is up to you. We are focusing on what students have to do here in the local area at Bard College. If you have questions about flying back and forth, you might want to look up the restrictions for your specific state and movement. Maybe reach out to airlines, see what they're doing. I did have a couple specific questions about flights and flying and things like that. So if your plan is to come, drop your student, and fly back home, great. But that plan is up to you. And we're just focusing on making sure we receive your student, they have all the information they need, and they can quarantine or be here safely. So I would just look into what your home state or country requires of you when you're flying back and forth. If you want to ship things in advance, you can do that. Obviously, if you're arriving next week, just be mindful of that timing. I would ship things as quickly as possible if you want those to arrive next week. There's a question about someone who's quarantining off campus in an off-campus facility with their family for 2 weeks. Can they ship things or send things prior? The answer is yes. Shipping and receiving will hold them for you. So if you want to ship things, please do that. And then your student, when they move on to campus, can collect those at that time. So I know that it's 2 o'clock, but I think if it's okay with everyone else, we could maybe continue moving for another couple minutes just to get through some more of these questions. Let's see. Do we have to quarantine by the date I got to New York, or can we wait for some days?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what that question means. But if you feel free to clarify, and we can try to get to it. If a student is a minor, will they have a chance to be put in a hotel room if they are required to be quarantined? I'm also not quite sure what that means. All students who need to quarantine will either be in Robbins Hall or be in a hotel room. They'll all have singles and ensuite bathrooms.
I think what they're asking, Mackie, is can we make sure that people who are 17 are on campus?
I see. Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Cicely?
Okay.
So I would refer to Cicely, who made the
If there's a concern, absolutely, you can let us know about it prior, and we'll pre-assign. I have a question for Deirdre. There were a couple of questions about receiving L&T materials, and
So I did ask about that, and I talked to Bill Dixon this morning, the director of L&T. They will be bringing over the hard copy anthology and put it in the kind of drop-off location, the conference room that will be set aside for Bard College students. So the anthologies will be there for students because, of course, we all love to have hard copy as well as digital. But and I think there'll be limited capacity to bring over any additional materials. But the language and thinking instructors really are planning to minimize printing and having to circulate a lot of new paper. So I think once students get there, they should be able to go to the conference room, the Stockade room. I'm imagining there'll be a beautiful Bard banner there where folks will be picking up their food on a daily basis. And that's where the anthologies will also be held, as well as their Bard notebooks and other things that can be dropped off by L&T.
There's a question about going back to sort of the working out situation and what availability, what activities there will be available. If you are coming in either just for recreation, or I think this is specifically about an athlete, if you're coming in as an athlete, your coach will, I'm sure, be in touch with you both for sort of team bonding activities, whether they're socially distanced or remote, but also we'll be able to provide you with a plan, and we'll be thinking about access to equipment or lack of access to equipment when suggesting workouts and fitness and training. So if you have a question about how to stay fit and how to stay sort of how to stick with your routine, feel free to reach out to your coach about that. I'm sure they can offer you some suggestions and think about workouts and things like that for you. Let's see, drinking water. The tap water is fine to drink, and so you should feel free to do that. Drinks will be available, I believe, with the meal delivery as well. So you'll definitely have access to drinking water wherever you are, either on campus or in the hotel. Let's see. Sorry, just getting through some of these questions. There's a question about the L&T, the requirement for L&T reading. Deirdre, the only reading requirement so far has been one book, which
Correct.
is Mendelssohn, which is
correct. Yes, and then you'll get the anthology. You'll see it's a black binder with poetry, essays, philosophy, fiction, all of which is provided for students, and it will be accessible both digitally and in this hard copy binder.
Then there was a clarification for the earlier question to clarify, once we get to New York, which is Wednesday, can I start to quarantine then to reduce the amount of time I have to quarantine on campus? Yes, as soon as you start quarantining in a non-restricted state, those days go towards your total quarantine requirement on campus. So if you arrive in New York Wednesday and you start quarantining and you're scheduled to say arrive on Friday, that's 2 days that you'll have been in quarantine. That reduces your quarantine to 12 days on campus, not 14. Let's see, we have a print. Is there a printer available in the hotel for students who want to print things? I'm sure we can figure that out for you if it's required. So we can definitely have those conversations once you are here and settled and figure out how to get you access to a printer or printed material. I'm sure that's something we can do. Let's see, dietary restrictions. So all of those dietary restrictions will be collected and worked out with our dining services. So fear not if you have restrictions or allergies. We want to be sensitive to those. And I think, Cicely, you answered a question in the chat earlier about this. They will be communicated to the dining facilities. I don't know if there's anything to add there, but that's, I think that sums it up perhaps. All right, so we're getting just down to a couple of final questions here. As a person coming from a quarantine state, who do I contact? Oh, sorry, I just answered that question. Sorry. Let's see. What happens when the rest of students arrive, new, renewed students? Yes, so this plan will be repeated for transfers and I believe for returning students as well. This is again, state required. The actual requirements and recommendations might actually shift between now and then, and we will, as we've been doing every day for months, we will shift our plans and be the chameleons that we are and make sure that we are taking best practices, state requirements, and the recommendations from the doctors we're working with at New Vance Health to provide students with exactly what they need to stay safe and healthy. So it might look a little different at the end of August. That includes perhaps for transfers and returning students, but whatever it is, we will communicate what that looks like to you before you arrive, so you're prepared. And if it doesn't change, it will look very similar to this. So I think that gets us through the bulk of our questions. I want to thank Cicely and Bethany and Deirdre for your months of hard work preparing for this moment. It has been what it has been, and we have learned a lot, and we're so excited to have you all join us on campus. It's going to be a team effort, a group effort to keep everyone safe. So definitely keep an eye on your email for those kinds of directions and instructions. and be in touch. We can't wait to see you on
Can
campus.
I add one little question or
Yeah.
note, which is, I know everyone's busy registering. Registration's happening now also as you're preparing to arrive, and it should come to an end right early next week. So on actually Monday. So if you're having any questions or problems about your registration, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email, I'll put my email address in here. And we are very, very, wait, how do I do this? Oh, I guess I have to do it in the chat. Or the registrar, Peter Gadsby. We're very happy to help you. It's the first time you're doing it. We hope you've connected with your faculty advisors. But if for some reason you are in need of extra help, please don't hesitate to send an email.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekends wherever you are, and get packing. We're excited to see you on campus next week. All right. Thanks, everyone.